Despite We'll call the meeting to order for the South Montgomery Board of Trustees. Let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mason, would you call roll?
Sure. Jason Bannon.
Here.
Julie Hess.
Present.
Jerry Kincaid.
Present.
Jake Watson.
Here.
Brevin. Here. Kate here. Superintendent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know where he's at.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Oh, I saw him in a tractor.
And we will open the floor for the 2026 budget hearing.
Okay, so my part is going to be short and sweet. I've done it long enough now, I know really everyone just wants to hear from Mike and not from Kristen. I'm starting to take a little less offense to it. But, so, and then if there are any questions though that you guys have, or there's anything else you want answered, later on let Stephanie know or let me know, and then we'll get them answered if there's something you think of after we're done. So like usual, on this, the agenda for tonight, we're just gonna do the budget requests that we're gonna ask for this year, and then ask you guys to approve at the October board meeting officially, and we'll turn all of that in, and any questions, and then I'll turn it over to Mike for the fiscal plan presentation and just updates with Senate Middle Act and all of that. Let's get rolling. Okay. So the first one is the education fund. And I know that most of you guys know this, but I just like to share it again. So, and Mike will review this too, but our budget request is always high. We don't plan on spending this much money, but we're gonna appropriate and ask for the money in case we would need it, because it's just better to start high, but we will not intend to spend this much money. So our budget request for 26 will be $13,939,050 for the education fund. That's teachers, nurses, principals, counselors, athletic director, athletic coaches, instructional aides, all their salaries and benefits, and all textbook and curricular materials, library books and supplies, building supply accounts, graduation and instructional accounts. I did miss a typo that Stephanie had to fix, and I forgot to fix it on this version, so I'm sorry.
Never listened to me.
You cannot say I never listen to her. I always listen to her. This fund is like funded and supported through the basic grant, which is our state funding. It's based on ADM, which is average daily membership. The count day is coming up. So we're still holding steady. We hope to stay right where we are, go up just a little bit more. This year, one of the new things from legislation is that we are gonna have to spend 65% of our total basic grant on teacher salary and benefits. So it's very clear what those are, like what counts towards that, like there's a formula and all of that. This year we were at 63%, which we had to be at 62.99% for this past year. So we were at 63. So that'll be through raises and all of that. We've added a few teachers, so there's no real concerns yet on any of us being able to meet that number. So we, like I said, we'll be asking also for approval of the October budget adoption, the authority for us to transfer 15% of the monthly basic grant to the operations fund. We've done this ever since it's been allowed as needed, so we can move up to 15% over to operations to cover operation costs. So we'll plan to continue that. Right now, that's the plan for 2026, but you guys will sign off on that. That'll be included in the things that you approve in October and sign off on that we're allowed to do that moving forward in 2026. And it's up to the 15%. That's where Mike and I, when I send him the reports, he looks at it if we're like, oh, we're gonna dial it back or we don't need to do it this month. And then we can also do 2 months worth in 1 month if we need to because we missed a month. So it's just 15% total for the year. So it's not, you don't have to do it in the month. It just does equal that in total. Then the debt service fund, we're advertising for $5,834,250. We do have a GO bond paying off at the end of 26. It'll be the final payment on one of our GO bonds. So then that's all of you guys know that have been on the board. Then that opens up our room and keeps us exactly where we need to be going to fund our things. So that includes the new debt that we're taking. We'll have to pay And then that'll also include the GEO bonds that we have outstanding that we have taken prior to this. For the operations fund, the budget request is gonna be $7,469,725. That includes technology, transportation, other capital expenditures, transportation, central office staff salaries and benefits. This is funded through property taxes, and then our transfer pending your guys' approval next month is what mainly funds this account. There's obviously miscellaneous revenues and such, but this is what we bank on is the property tax and the basic rate transfer. In this though, with technology, any of our larger purchases and our bus replacement plan, the goal in 26 and moving forward is we'll use some of our debt funds to pay those to. That's why we did the operations sort of alleviation kind of projects is how we kind of listed them. So some of the expenditures that typically come out of operations, we will take out of debt that fit the categories that are allowable through number. And then, like usual, we're gonna appropriate the 500,000 in rainy day. I'd like to not use it. We haven't used it since I've been here, I don't think, or maybe once several years ago, but we'd like to keep doing it that way. So this is exactly what it means. It's like a rainy day. If there's an immediate need that arises. But we have the appropriation there, but obviously if something like that happened, there'll be lots of discussions prior to us using that or spending it with Dr. Hofer and the board before we forwarding the appropriations there. So that's really it for me. Anything else? Okay. See all of you, Mike.
Okay. Good evening. Good to see everyone again. Let me stand over here. I can use that table. Before I get into the fiscal plan though, I'm going to kind of recap the last legislative session. Yeah, it was probably the most difficult session I'd ever been through, and I've been doing it a long time. It started off like a train and it finished like a train, and I was working in the counties as well. I was talking to the director of the county association late January, and I said, David, I don't know how you feel. I said, this feels like a train going through the session. His comment was interesting to me. He said, this is the last week of January, and it feels like the last week of the session. There was so much going on through that session. There was a lot of infighting. Obviously, a lot of focus on property tax reform. And it started off with a proposal from the governor, which he had run on the platform to reduce property taxes and somewhat rewinded them back. And that was the first version of Senate Bill 1, and the cuts were pretty deep. And that was not unique to schools. That was cities, towns, counties, townships, libraries. Everyone was going to be impacted pretty deeply by that. Senators began to work on their proposal, and I do know for a fact, because I talked to some of them, they were actually trying to negotiate some of that back, saying that's just too far. We can't go that too far. And they came out with their version of that, and their version really wasn't rewinding property taxes, but they were going to limit future revenue. And they were going to give us 0% increase in 26. They were going to give us 1% in 27, 2% in 28, and then we'd go back to a normal level of funding. So their solution looked a little different. Now, neither one of those proposals included any replacement revenue in it. Then went over to the House side. Jeff Thompson, the chair of House Ways and Means, been there a long time, had been working on a piece of legislation that is pretty complex in how it works. And it didn't stop at just property tax. It also affects local option income tax. Now, schools don't get any local option income tax, but cities and towns and counties do. And at the end of the day, those units have opportunities to make up some of the losses that are going to be experienced. But schools have no way of making it up. So I would say, from my perspective, schools got hit harder than some of the other civil units of government. Just now, we'll yet to see how that's all going to play out. But there, on that side of the government, it is a movement from property tax to income tax. There'll be lots of conversation happening about what income tax rates should be. Cities and towns, for the first time, will be adopting their own rate that they've not had before. And so the county will be responsible for some of that rate. But nevertheless, what's going to have quite a bit of impact on property taxes that they've increased deductions. And today, as it stands, we have what's called a 37.5% supplemental deduction that homeowners get off their assessment. And that will be increasing very rapidly between now and 2031. It will increase from 37.5% today to only 40% next year in 26. But by 2031, that is going to be a 66.7% deduction on every home. And so that is going to erase a lot of assessed valuation on your tax base, what you're able to tax on. And so I use this as an example, a $300,000 house. If you have a $300,000 house, by 2031, you're only paying on a $100,000 assessed valuation. In addition to that, the governor also, by the way, on all those proposals was not happy that the cuts weren't deeper. Ultimately, then how they got Jeff Thompson's bill through is they added to it a new homestead credit, brand new, starting in 2026, and it's a credit up to 10% or $300 max. So if you take that $300,000 home again, if they're at 1%, the cap, they pay $3,000 in tax. But now they're not gonna pay $3,000 in tax, they're gonna pay $2,700 because they'll now get this new $300 credit. That is a pure loss of revenue in 2026, and I'll show you what that looks like in your numbers. And so that was new. So a pretty big hit on the assessments of homes going to happen between now and 2031. They didn't stop there. They now have a new deduction for the 2% category, which is rental property and farm ground. And so they're now getting a new deduction starting in 2026. It starts at 6% and will grow to 33.3% by the year 2031. So in addition to that, on farm ground, they actually lowered the assessed valuation per acre on that as well. They changed what's called the capitalization rate. And that resulted in about a 7% deduction. So on a piece of farm ground, they're going to have this new, they're going to have a decrease in the per acre price of the assessment, but then they're also going to get this new 6% deduction. So that was a big change. Another change that is coming is business personal property. Business personal property is not affected in 2026, but in 2027, any personal property $2 million or less that's currently reported will no longer have to report. And so a lot of, obviously, businesses will benefit from that. Your larger industrial, operations will still have to pay that. But they also got a break in that if they put in new equipment now, they can depreciate it all the way down to zero, where before there was a 30% floor. They can depreciate down to 30%, and then they always kept that much of it. So on that side of the equation, they also receive some benefit from that. So the theme of that is they're wiping out a lot of the tax base, and it's going to be harder to generate property tax from that. So I'm going to show you that here in a moment. But big picture, that's really what happened. Is it happened all pretty quickly too. The governor was threatening a special session, but at the end of the day, they all circled, and it never went to a committee, and it went right to the governor's desk, and it passed pretty quickly. So quite a bit of change. I would say, it was a complicated system before, and they've doubled down on it. I mean, it has been difficult to figure out how this is going to play out over time. The good news is, I think it was intentional, that it's over a long period of time. instead of just slamming that all in at once, there are a lot of legislative sessions between now and 2031. If they see things start to go too far off track, they could step back and adjust. So that's the legislative update in a nutshell of a very, very active session. And people, and the results we're still trying to figure out the results of that. Tonight is just a public hearing, no actions required of the board this evening. You'll actually adopt the budget on October 6th, so there's time. If after this evening you hear this information, you have questions, we have time to get back to you. So Kristen, I'm going to start on page 42. It'll be the page number, not the PDF number. So it's enrollment. So they've already mentioned a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't see it, sorry.
That's all right.
Mike, you said a long period of time. What's that long period of time?
Well, in 2026, that supplemental homestead deduction starts at 40% and will be 66.7% by 2031.
Okay.
So it's a 5-year period starting in 26.
But they can fiddle with the assessed value at any time to negate that, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
They could fiddle with the assessed value at any time, which would totally negate that.
It could, yeah. So I think that's intentional, I think they're gonna see how this squeeze works. You're fortunate that you're in a strong cash position. You're in a pretty good financial position to get through this. And I would say that you're not going to have to take a knee-jerk reaction to this, but you're going to have to react to it. It is going to change how we do things going forward. I personally think there are going to be a lot of systems hit the wall before you, and I think that will be what triggers change. Yeah, someone else's demise might end up working to your advantage in this. So, two key elements when we're putting together a budget for the school is your enrollment and assessed valuation. Enrollment drives your revenue from the state. And so this is not the ADM, it's already been mentioned, that's coming up. But Kristen had sent me the enrollment by grade level as of the 12th of September, so it's pretty recent. And the good news is, see, I'm pointing back here so everybody's seeing the same. The good news is, can everybody see it here? So,
If I have both
back, there we go, Kristen, right
I was
there.
gonna say, you could probably just go to the end and then just blow it up, just with those
That's
few.
okay, sorry.
There we go, right there. So the good news is, we're up 20 students and you were up 30 students. You're very fortunate in that you're growing. I can tell you there are a lot of districts that are showing declining enrollments. And it's more of the theme than this, than seeing growth. So you know this, I'm not a demographer, but I do try to average these cohorts going through. If we're able to maintain 120 kindergartners, if we can maintain that number, and as those cohorts move through, I'm anticipating you can still see some growth in the next 2 years. And that really works to your advantage in the funding formula. And so you're funded by the number of students you have, not by the number of seats you have. I'm going to talk more about the formula in a minute. But that is encouraging. So seeing potentially some growth there. The next one, Kristen, page 10, the assessed valuation. This was just certified. There are a lot of counties that were delayed this year in certifying their assessed values due to changes in Senate Bill 1. But there we go, Kristen. There we go. Zoom in just a little bit. There we go. There we go. So certified assessed valuation for 2026. I was thrilled to see this number. Yeah. If you think about all the things I just mentioned, supplemental deduction going up, 2% properties getting a new 6% deduction. Those are big hits on the assessed valuation, and you still saw growth. I was really worried. Obviously, you got a lot of farm ground, and with a decrease in the per acre price and this additional 6%, I was worried what that was going to look like. So that is very positive. And so just kind of recap, right now we're sitting at 37.5% deduction, we go to 40, not a big change. Here's where I'm throwing the caution flag out, and I'm seeing this in other models. I did not recommend it for you yet, but there's a group out there called Policy Analytics. They do great work with parcel by parcel analysis, where they actually take the county data and then they try to apply all the new Senate Bill 1 factors to that. I didn't recommend it because we didn't really need that kind of data. A lot of schools need it because they're trying to figure out what their referendum's going to do. But what I've seen in some of the models that I have been a part of is 27, we're going to see decrease in assessed valuation because all those supplemental deductions and the home supplemental deduction starts going up at 6%. And then the farm ground and the rental property all get 6% new deduction. So you got to have a lot of growth to offset that. Another thing that we saw in 26 that was a bit new is all commercial property hadn't been assessed or updated in a while, and the state came out with new assessment manuals, and those were all updated. So we saw some bump in commercial value properties. So that helped 26. But this is what we're kind of seeing in some of these other models is as those deductions come into play, it's going to drive those assessed valuations down, and it's going to cause tax rates to increase. And where we have always been tax rate minded, we've been trying to manage around a flat tax rate. We're unlikely going to be able to do that in the future, and our conversation will be about the levy, how much levy we're asking the community to pay. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But this will drive up tax rates, and the legislators know this. They expect tax rates to go up. So I think in 26, it's one more year of a rate conversation, but thereafter it's going to become a levy conversation. And we'll be trying to explain to the community how much more in property tax we're asking them to collect. We don't decide who pays it, but we're going to be saying how much we will need to operate.
Can I ask you a question on this?
Sure.
Two questions. One, I know that farmland is valued different because they don't use fire and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. But when the value, like we have a lot of farmland selling at inflated rates because of 1031 money right now.
Mhm.
Will that help us? Will that make our farmland value go? It won't. Okay.
It's based on the market, what the productivity of the land is.
Okay.
It's a pretty complex formula,
Okay.
but it's not based on market value
At all. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was way different, but I didn't know how. And then,
Doesn't Purdue kind of step
Yeah,
on
they-
that,
they're-
try to learn that?
Yeah.
recently?
They're a part of that. It's more based on the productivity and the market. They don't look at just 1 year, they look at trends within that and averages. And so I can get the formula to you,
it's
but,
okay. I won't understand.
but it's not market value. Unlike a home is market value.
So my next question is, we have about 170 for sure new homes coming into our district, and then possibly 200 to 400 more townhomes, condos, and homes in our district. But they're all TIF'd. But that still will help us property, like that's still gonna help our AV, correct? Not at all, until the TIF wears off?
Until the TIF pays off. It is, once it's in a TIF, it's in the TIF until the bonds are paid off. And so if you get kids out of that,
I was just
open
gonna say,
enrollment,
because they're
Right.
ADM money.
The ADM money, but I was just thinking specifically the AV. I thought there was still a way to get part of that
no,
AV. Okay,
How
no.
long was the TIFs last for?
Most of them are 20-year TIFs. Yeah, most of them.
Shit's going to.
Those absolutely
no
no
expansion.
yeah, they're gonna have their own TIF.
So
I don't think that was, do you know for sure?
I don't know.
I think it's only a 10-year.
it might be only 10 year.
Okay.
I've seen that happen though, then they get extended. They go on, they end up getting
Okay,
established again in a different way. Sometimes if they're generating,
but we get money off of Newport and it's TIF'd.
but you're not getting, not what's TIF, you're not getting off a new core, you're getting the base, whatever the base was originally. So TIF is, they call it a base. Before anything happens in terms of development, they capture that base.
Right.
And you continue to get that assessment. That anything new brought in on top of that, that gets captured to repay the bonds.
I just for some reason thought a lot of our AV value came from Newport, but I think all of it is TIF still.
Yeah, that is, matter of fact, we saw that affect our AV last year when it only went up 1.23%. Remember that we
Right.
passed that late in December the year before,
Mhm.
and the result of that didn't happen until our 25 assessment. So, yeah, we don't, now, if you were to ever run a referendum, if you were to run an operating referendum, that period is all TIFs. And it actually, that rate goes into those TIFs and you get all the money from it, homes or business. Not saying you want to run a referendum, I'm just saying, but that is the benefit of a referendum, is it captures the entire AV. So, yeah, that is not, so, yeah, that's,
Right now.
yeah, it just depends. We have time, I think I'm conservative on this and the modeling. And you're gonna see that it's not affecting your revenue so much as it's affecting your tax rate. And that's you're gonna see large increases in your tax rate. That's gonna be confusing to people. Like, why do you increase your rate? 9%. But it's not because you're asking for more property taxes, because the assessed valuation is dropping. So if your levy, your property tax levy is going up 4%, but the assessed value is going down 5.75%, you're gonna have a 9% rate increase. If you need those two things to be consistent, what I'm gonna show you tonight is your AV grew 6.21. That's actually driving down your operations fund rate and allowing a little more rate for the debt. And that'll be part of my recommendation to see for your consideration. But like I said, we have some time to kind of see this play out. But that's what everyone's expecting to happen. Let's see, the next page, Kristen, you've heard me say this before, and I'm not gonna spend much time on this. For many, many years, the state years ago said, we don't want property taxes increasing faster than the income of the state. And they locked our property tax increases into what's called the 6-year non-farm personal income factor. Well, that factor started growing too fast. And a lot of it was because we had this pandemic money pushed through in 21. You can see a large increase in 21 that's throwing off that average. And that average now is saying 6%. Under that old formula, our levy would have gone up 6%. But the state in this last session said, nope, we're not allowing property tax to grow 6%, we're capping it at 4%. Now, this is the third year now that they have moved away from this factor. The question is what they will do going forward, because, and I think you're going to see this, that average is still over 5% going into those next 2 years. And I don't think they're gonna allow that. That's the way the law is currently written. I mean, it's supposed to go back to this, but I think we're gonna get hit on that in the next session as well. That's a statewide factor. Even growing units, I mean, fast growing units really got hurt on this. Westfield would be an example of that. Mount Vernon schools, they're growing pretty rapidly. And they were capped at 4%, where they used to have a provision that allowed their levies to grow a little more consistent with what was happening. So if you're not growing, 4% is not too bad, to keep up with inflation. But if you're growing 10%, 4% is horrible. You can't keep up under that model. So they were not very kind to growing units in this last session. So in your case, growing enrollment's good because it helps the funding formula. You like that side of it. Page 23, Kristen. And I won't spend much time on this page either, but I just want to show you, this is the maximum levy calculation for your operations fund. On down, Kristen, we're going to go on down. Keep going. A little bit further, right there, that page right there. So this is the 4% cap that I was telling you about. And so these increases reflected that non-farm personal income factor. But again, it was hard for the state to say, we're going through property tax reform, and they were gonna let these levies grow. Now, that one Senate proposal I was telling you about, they wanted that number to be 0. That you would not get any increase in that levy. And then it would have gone 1% and then 2%. So the 4% I was actually pleased with. So, okay, the funding formula itself, it's way too tiny to show on the screen, but I just want to share with you, on paper, it looks like the state gave us a lot of money this year in the first year in the 25-26 budget, but it's misleading. Kristen, actually, I'll see if we can blow it up. Go to page 22. Let's see if we can blow it up real quick and let them see this. One more page, I think. And go down just a little bit now. Right there. No, I'm sorry, we gotta go up, way up. Keep going. Keep going. They're right there, that's fine. Oh, no, one more, I'm sorry, that's the complexity index. Yeah, if you could scroll down just a little, Kristen, or zoom in, right, go up. Gotta go up a page now.
Sorry,
Gotta go up a page,
saying that,
yeah.
like,
Zzz.
I need a mouse.
Go up one page there, if you can. Now we're into the inputs, sorry. Yeah, right there, that's where I go, we'll zoom in right here, if you can see my. So, yeah. Ugh. Oh, I better stop there, we'll be chasing that around. Anyway, what's called the foundation, in other words, what is given per pupil, no matter where you are in the state, north, south, east, west, whether urban, suburban, or rural, they have a foundation amount they give for every pupil, and it is based on the number of pupils, not the number of seats. They put 4.28% in that number. Well, that sounds good, but what they did is they rolled textbook rental into the formula. And you know, where textbook rentals used to be part of the state obligation, they roll that in there, and it makes it look like you're getting a lot of money. And you are getting more money because you do have more enrollment. And so right now, I'm estimating that you're going to get $535,000, a little better than that. But we've appropriated $250,000, so that would leave $285,000 of new dollars for raises. That's actually not too bad. I mean, considering what I'm seeing in other places, because your enrollment's growing, you're getting some more money from that. Now, if you can spend less than $250,000 on textbooks, and I know they're trying to dig into that right now. If we spend less, that leaves more for raises. But going forward, we're always going to be responsible, our education fund is always going to be responsible for textbooks now. That's new.
What is the per pupil dollar amount?
It is 7,000 right there. It's Christian, you got it.
7,071.
7,071. Now that's before what's called the complexity adjustment. And complexity means it's a different term. It's basically the free and reduced lunch makeup of your district. Everybody gets this, and then there's a complexity amount that is put on top of that. They did not raise those grants. As a matter of fact, they decreased one of those grants. So that's where they get the differentiation between districts in the formula. Everybody starts off with the same amount, and then kind of based on your complexity, they give you another layer of funding. But that didn't get much money this time, so what you're really seeing. But the most important thing you ought to know too is in 26, 27, 1.49%. That's pretty thin. But if we get 30 more students, we'll get more than 1.49%. And that's kind of what that trend looks like right now. So that's encouraging. So
let's say somebody homeschools their kid, or where does that money go? If it's per pupil?
The state only pays for it if they're in an enrolled program. So if somebody's just keeping their kids home and homeschooling, they're not getting any funding for that. But if they're in a private school, they now have vouchers that they can take with them. Or if there's a charter school, the charter school claims them. And there has been a movement. not so much here in your district, but IPS has taken a pretty big hit from charter schools, and so
Homeschool more here, we need to figure out a way to capture, figure out a class that they all need to take. How many hours they have to be at school?
well, you can only report them based on the percentage they're attending. So if they're taking a class, you used to be able to do that. You used to be able to claim if they had one class here, you could count them. But now they've changed that formula and you can only count the portion that they're actually being in the school district.
David, the gentleman I met with at Chase Bank around personal banking was a Southmont family, 7 kids, homeschooled. Attends the Orthodox Church, told me that the majority of families in there all homeschool their kids, all Southmont families. When I talked to them about it, none of them really want their kids to go to, no, they like Southmont. They weren't necessarily into higher education and college. They like the CTE programming. So we talked a lot about CTE programming, like you can enroll in CTE and have all of the work-based learning programs and also do sports,
I
so.
was about to ask, is there anything to draw them in with athletics, or is that anything?
It's
Got a
something,
handful last year, like a small
Yeah, we
handful, but we
did.
did, like they come.
and that will take the percentage even for the period or two, because normally when kids come and they see what's happening in the schools, then they wanna have more, but
Sometimes they want the band program. I used to see that.
Or FFA or something like that?
so it was all those types of programs.
So your outlook looks a little better because you got that enrollment going up. So that's a good thing for you. Okay, page 1, Kristen will kind of show them what this looks like. Starting maybe with just a quick recap of 20.
There.
No, we keep going back. Right there, Kristen.
Down, okay. Down Zoom.
Zoom out, yeah. Scroll down just a little if you can. Okay, just so you see those cash balances.
I'll get there, when there's no pressure without everyone watching.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Jamie Richard Mouse.
No. That's, I gotta go just a smidge.
Yeah, just a smidge up.
This page, right? Yeah.
Yes, and then we're just missing the bottom line, the cash balances. There we go.
And then I'm gonna blow it up. Let me
Okay.
Move the page.
And it got
It's like,
quiet.
oh,
And it got quiet.
slide that bar, you can do it.
Yeah, but what happened? Not. There.
There we go. There we go. Perfect, right there.
Okay.
All right, right there. So this is the education fund, just kind of quick recap of 24. 24 looked pretty good when you look at your revenue and the transfer out. These 2 lines are important because this is telling you whether your budget is in or out of balance. And so you can see that we actually generated more revenue than we transferred out. And we ended the year with $5,175,000. That is a really good cash balance. That is a really good cash balance. We might go through a little cash this year, still be over $5 million. If you had I always recommend, like, you probably shouldn't be below 8.33%. This money comes in monthly from the state, so you don't need a large cash balance. You also have the $500,000 sitting in rainy day as a cash reserve. So this is, schools would love to have a 43% cash balance. And so be very, you're in a very fortunate situation. Now, what I've shown here, Kristen's already said this, we advertise and recommend you adopt a budget higher than what we plan to spend. And that's really what we're proposing. We transferred $800,000, or plan to transfer $800,000 out of education this year to operations, and we're not recommending that change, that we keep it at $800,000, or at least that's our forecast right now. And this is the number that actually could be 15%. So there are a lot of districts that have to transfer 15%, and you're not even close you're not even close to 15%. So, that all looks good. Now, here's that new line item that you see in here for textbook rentals. That's that new line. The formula's folded the revenue in up here, but then the new line for textbook rentals is in the 26 budget. So, Kristen, if you would go to the next page. Now, this is where I spend a little more time on. This is the debt service fund. So, I think you're okay here, Kristen.
Okay.
So this next year in 26, you've gone through the bond process. We went through it early. Congratulations to get that done and out of the way. We now have the assessed valuation, which is what we've been waiting on to issue that bond. So now we're ready to issue those bonds. But we can do this without a total tax rate increase. As I've already mentioned, I'll show you in a minute, but your operations fund rate is actually going to go down a little bit, which allows you to capture a little more levy in the debt fund without increasing the overall rate. And again, farmers will still see a decrease because if the assessed values, if their values go down and get the new deduction and keep your tax rate flat, they're going to see a decrease there. So, what you also see up here is a new line, a negative line, which is that new homestead credit. Now, they have not protected that from the debt fund. And what I mean by that, we've never been able to take any of the loss of the circuit breaker in the debt fund. And I don't think this is intentional. I think the next session, this is going to change, and that this loss that we have in the debt fund will be back in our operations fund. That's not good. I would rather you take it in the debt fund because you can raise your levy in the debt fund to make it up. You can't raise your operations fund rate to make up the loss of that homestead credit. So the DLGF is going to work this budget as if it doesn't happen. But what you can see here is we're really kind of keeping the payments the same. And then you see this drop off out here, and that's intentional. So even with this new bond, we're trying to structure it in a way that allows another year, 2 years from now, to be able to issue more bonds if you so choose. And I think that's a good strategy because we don't know what the next 2 years are going to hold. And that's an ace in the hole for you, because anything we can do with the bond helps to relieve the operations fund. If we didn't have the bonds, we'd be having more expense in the operations fund, which means we got to transfer more out of education to operations, and ultimately affects, what we can pay in salaries. So the bonds help that relieve that operations fund. But another thing to note is this is 2025, 4,783,000. Without raising the total tax rate, we can generate a levy of $5.2 million in this fund. And it's at that point that I think that's going to be our new benchmark, that we will be saying to the community in the next year, like, hey, your tax rate might be going up, but we're not asking you for a dime more in debt than we did last year. That's going to be confusing to people, but that's how we're going to have to frame that message.
So we went through that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the assessed values jumped a lot.
Yeah.
Like you raised our tax rate, and we did.
Yeah, that's right. So we're not seeing those.
But what's different this time is the amount of money we paid went up, and in this actually, it won't go up. We'll raise the whole levy, but the discounts will kind of
The discounts,
counteract it.
depending on, this is the thing about this piece of legislation. You can't say that everybody's taxes are going to go down, because if they got a notice of assessment and their property value went up, it may only offset what the value went up. So you just can't say everybody's gonna get a $300 discount. That's not true either. So I can also tell you that all of my clients are all just different. I mean, it's just, they have this piece of legislation, but every model I had to create this year was just different. And not everyone, it's been a really hard year because of how this all plays out differently in different places. You have a bunch of apartments, you had a bunch of apartments before, suddenly they're getting 6% deductions that they hadn't gotten before too. You know, just depends on the makeup of the community. That's why I was so thrilled to see yours at 6%, even with the farm ground changes. But this is what I'm talking about. If we, you know, we're gonna issue bonds this year, we'll replace the bonds that are rolling off, but then provide another step down in that, so that in 2 years from now, if the operation fund's struggling, or if it's not struggling and you've got some priority projects you want to fund, we'd be able to do that without raising the levy. Okay, and so again, it'll be about the levy, not the tax rate at that point, if that makes sense. So, Kristen, the next page is the operations fund. And this again, oops, down just a little bit. Too many numbers, it's hard to get it all on one page, isn't it?
Right, maybe one.
You're on the right page if you just zoom in a little tighter. Oops. So here, let me, before you go off that, Kristen, let's go back up a little bit. This new line, like the debt service fund, that $200,000 loss is due to that new homestead credit. So your levy, your property tax levy went up 4%. Your levy from 25 to 26 went up 4%, but they took $200,000 and gave it back in the credit. So we really didn't get 4% levy increase in the operations fund. And then, so if you think about schools, the percentages you're getting in the formula and the real dollars you're netting out of this levy, not a lot of new money for schools that came out. So Kristen, if you would go down, show these cash balances. Oops. That's fine right there. But maybe up just a little bit, Kristen, I want to show this unused appropriation number. So if, oops.
It like does it and then it doesn't. Are you seeing that? Like it's not just.
So if you spent all the budget this year, and I'm not saying you are going to, but if you spent all the budget we had appropriated this year, you'd be spending $1 million more than you're taking in. There's probably some things that we're paying for in this year's budget that we can reimburse ourselves out of the bond for to make up for some of that. But this is a worst case scenario. And so then next year, the target for the district should be, we want to spend $7.1 million. That really matches our revenue. So you want to, no matter what we have appropriated or budgeted, we're really trying to spend to the revenue, right? So that says we're in or out of balance. So that's always the goal, and that being the forecast. Now, what I would tell you would throw this off again is if that legislation changes and that homestead credit is moved from the debt fund to the operations fund, now suddenly we're gonna have $200,000 less here. And if that happens, though, you'll have that step down in the debt fund, you can issue debt and maybe move some things, move some expenses out of this fund to the debt fund. So it's like a Rubik's Cube, right? You just gotta keep figuring out where you can move things.
Our cash money, like what interest rate are we earning on that?
Our money market, I think, is still at, I mean, we earn like $14,000 a month on our one account that is just like our savings account. So I feel like they lowered it 1 percentage point earlier this year. So we were at like 5 something and now we're at 4 something, I'm pretty sure. But that's been significant. And then it's the same like in our geo bond, the one account, it's a higher, and then our regular everyday is obviously just a normal. I'd have to go back and look.
In 2024, you collected $213,000 in interest that went into the education fund. Now, the problem with that, right, just announced rate cut, and could be 2 more rate cuts. Every time they cut the interest rate, it's good for mortgages, but it's not good for your earnings. So that works against the education fund.
Is there something that we could put half of our cash balance in that makes us more than a money market?
We did it once with debt money because you're allowed to earn a certain amount. We did like a short-term CD, but those rates were, because we looked at it last time, it's just, once it's locked in, like the risk of the penalty, you know what I mean? Like that's why we've never done it with our regular cash, because to pull it out, the penalty may then defeated the purpose.
Have you used any of it with Trust Indiana? You used
We just used HHS.
You might want
They
to
were the
look at
most
Trust
competitive.
Indiana as an option.
Okay.
The reason I like it is because they have been paying a pretty decent interest rate. It reflects the market. It tends to be a little bit higher. But more importantly, Kristen, it's the most flexible.
Okay.
It operates like a money market and you can get it out real easy. You can leave it in. You don't have any period you have to leave it in. But Trust Indiana, you might consider it as, it operates like a money market, but some of my clients have gone to them. Okay. All right, Chris, let's go to tax rates. Oh, let's see, rainy day, I'll just touch on this real quick, page 4. We've already talked about it, but just know you got $600,000 in this fund in rainy day. We have been appropriating 500, but we've not used it. Let's go to tax rates, Kristen, that's on page 9. So, I've already talked about this, but this is where you can visually see it. Oops. We've always managed around this tax rate, with your debt and structures to keep things flat. Some years are better than others, but, we manage through those. But, and I've assumed that for you, that you would want to keep a flat tax rate again this next year with 6% AV growth. But you can see what happens with 6% AV growth and 4% levy growth, that rate is going down. But that would allow you to increase the debt rate slightly, but still keep the 0.9623. And another reason I don't think you want to lower it is because if you lower it, the next year the rate's going to be jumping a lot anyway, and you just make it that much farther of a leap for you to jump.
Right.
So, but you can see what I was saying about, you decrease the assessed valuation 5.75 and you get in this case, that's 5.9% levy growth, which I don't think they're going to allow. I think it's going to be closer to 4. But those are big increases when you get into 9%. So that's conservative, I think, meaning high. But just know that's coming. But that's where we're going to have to change the conversation the next year, saying to the community, we're actually not asking you for more money for debt, but your rate's going up. We don't decide how people get assessed. We can only tell you what we're going to collect.
But if for some reason our AV did go up quite a bit, then that number would
It would help,
less. Okay.
yes. Anything we can get the AV to grow would offset these deductions coming in. But you gotta get it to grow quite a bit now when these deductions are going up at a rate 6%
All right.
a year. You gotta go grow to get that to happen. So, again,
Right.
in summary, rough session, schools in general did not do real well. You're in a strong cash position. You don't have to take a knee-jerk reaction to anything I've said tonight, but over time, we're going to have to react to it. But we've got time to see this play out a little further.
No, there's not DOE. Is there federal, is federal money impacting states? I mean, is there
So-
money?
Yeah, now I might be stepping off on the political side here. I personally kind of like the idea of the federal government just sending it to the state and let the state send it out to us and get rid of all the federal regulations. These grants that we get from the federal government are so restrictive, and so you gotta have special audits for them. I personally would just like to see the federal DOE money sent to the state and then the state deal with it. So that's up in the air.
We haven't seen a direct impact yet, like we've gotten our,
Right.
like federal,
Talked about it.
our form of assessment, like they haven't pulled anything yet. The only thing that we were concerned about are some of our smaller grants that we really don't bank on. You know what I mean? Like,
They hit pause on some of them.
they did, and then like they quickly turned around.
They hit pause.
And then
Yeah,
they
really
gave
said-
the money.
Yeah, it really sent everybody in a scramble, because everybody had already counted on those dollars. But then they ultimately released it, so.
And we try to budget our teacher salaries that get paid with grant. We include those when we're bargaining for total dollar amount, so that we don't have to like panic in December because we have a Title I teacher that they're not gonna send us the money. So we bargain, like we we include that in our education budget, so that's like 100 and some thousand that comes out of what we budget. We always budget it in there, that way if it ever does get pulled or gets paused, we're not gonna hurt the people, we can make the decision for the next school year based on what's going on, so.
And that's a good question, because all of our Title I teachers wanted to come and meet personally to ask if they should be worried about their job, and then we explained those things and reassured them that that was not the case.
So when is it actually done? Like, the Department of Education, of course, on the news, you've seen for months that there is no such thing anymore, but you're saying that nothing's really changed.
Not yet. I think they moved some of those responsibilities to a different department. I can't remember off the top of my head.
They said they got rid of like a lot of like the
Free
money.
reduced lunch to ag.
the
Yeah,
problem.
they kind of dispersed some of that into some other agencies. But what we've seen on the federal grant side is not much change yet on this, but I've heard the conversation like, hey, we just want to get out of this all together and just kind of send the money out. I kind of like that personally.
It would save money from our audit too,
Yeah.
because having to do your federal audits, which is our child nutrition, our special ed, and our title money, that's what costs more money and more time on the audit, and there's more requirements.
There's
for
just so
reporting.
much bureaucracy that comes with those dollars. So that's what I have for you this evening. Again, this is just a public hearing. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to send them to Stephanie or Kristen. I'll be happy to address them. My pleasure.
Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah, my
We
pleasure.
just appreciate you, and
Yeah,
I know the last time we talked about policy analytics, because I was asking so many school corporations, and you were like, we're not there, so maybe we can talk again about that. or-
right. And especially now, looking back on it, I mean, if we wanted it for anything, we would wanted it for knowing how much debt to issue this
Right.
fall. But we know that.
We already know that. Okay.
Now we know it. And in the spring, probably around March, we're gonna know the real homestead credit amount. And so then that's another step that we'll know. Then we'll see what the short session brings, and we'll come back to you late May, early June with an update, like, all right, we need to do this, or we need to go this direction. We'll go from there. But
Yeah, so we
Again,
can kind of
26.
schedule in June, so
Yeah.
after everything's over, we can sit down and do another public hearing of what the real impact looks like, applying it to our numbers instead of like we think, because like you said.
a lot of the districts that are really kind of freaking out are the districts that have large referendums. Because they're, when they see that assessed valuation nosediving between now and 2031, the rate they adopted isn't going to generate anything close to what it's generating right now. So you're gonna see actually a lot,
Got to do a new one?
you're gonna see a lot of them going out early. A lot of Hamilton County districts are gonna be going out, a lot of districts are gonna go out early and rerun them early, but they're going to have to ask for a higher rate than what they even plan to collect in the first year, because they gotta have a high enough rate available to them in 2031. So they're gonna be saying to the community, hey, we need you to approve 50 cents on the referendum rate, but we only need 35 this first year. And so that'll be a confusing message to people too. Beach Grove has actually done, not Beach Grove, Speedway has actually done that for years. A little different type of community, a lot of trust there. They approve a high referendum rate, but they never collect it all. They never use all the referendum rate. That will be what districts will have to do that have referendums. They'll have to try and get the community to understand that we're asking you for this higher rate, but you're actually not gonna be paying more by 2031 because your assessment's gonna be so much lower, but your rate's gonna be so much higher. That's gonna be hard.
So there's been a lot of controversy in Avon, because they're wanting their referendum, so is that what they're asking for, and wanting to just from the
Yeah.
last referendum that they passed?
Yeah.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of schools are evaluating like, this is what we're getting right now. But that's going to go down, even in growing communities, it's going to go down. So,
Does the school board association just not lobby hard enough? I mean, some of the stuff that they come to the meetings and say to us, I'm like, that's your concern, you're worried about that, we don't have any money.
yeah,
You're not over there beating up a senator or anything? for us?
I was really encouraging
That's
this.
highly illegal, Julie.
What was the thing that they talked to us about this, and we were like, that, I can't remember, it was like, I don't remember, it was probably.
I would say probably the hardest lobby is IASBO lobbies really hard on school finance, and it just didn't go anywhere this year. Their minds were made up before the session started. That's just how I felt when it started, their minds. I mean, I encouraged our association to lobby for lit local option income tax, because that's where they're moving the other municipalities. And that's, I mean, where else are you gonna get the money? I mean, you're taking the tax base away. Now, I would tell you, even under this policy change, if you own a lot of real estate and you have low income, you love this idea. But if you have a lot of income and you don't own property, you hate this idea. But really what we're doing is we're shifting the payer for the civil side of government more to an income-based revenue source for them. So, but they don't want schools to have that. Matter of fact, there are some schools that get local option income tax right now, like in Johnson County. They were what's called a former Cadgett County, County Adjusted Gross Income Tax. And those counties used to give schools some of those dollars to reduce property tax. That went away, but they continued to get the revenue. And it's a pretty substantial amount of revenue. That's gone. They took that away under this whole lit restructuring. So not only are those schools grappling with the low increases in the per pupil funding and the decrease in assessed valuations, now they gotta figure out how they're gonna make up for those lit dollars that are no longer gonna get in 2028. They're gonna get them 27, 26, 27, but 28, that goes away.
Someone was saying part of the reason they did this for the property taxes was because of like older people, retired people, which I get, but can't they do some kind of like the old person
Yeah,
thing is so low, like why don't you just raise that
Right.
and give those people a break? Instead, you're
Yeah.
giving people $250 off
Yeah.
their, which makes no sense.
yeah.
And I
You know-
remembered what it was they talked about. It was about if we say Republican or Democrat on our, that was their biggest.
Oh,
And they
about-
talked about-
oh,
You mean for-
as-
And we're
as
like,
elected
how
officials.
about you talk about the property taxes?
Yeah.
Like, that was, they're like,
I will say I've had multiple meetings even this week with like Scott Bowling and Bob Taylor from IUPSS, IASBO, of TAG grant, everything else. I mean,
Yeah.
it all is on their radar.
Yeah. I would say the school board association doesn't, they're involved with school
Yeah.
funding, but not as much as
Just IASBO.
IASBO is. And I would just tell you, it's just, they just didn't have the, not that they didn't try, it's just that it was a hard
It's
decision.
already decided.
It was decided, I felt like it was decided before we started. And that's why I said it felt like a train when it started, you know, just like, hey, there's nothing you're gonna say to slow this down. And so I think the pendulum, I'm optimistic, you know, it's gonna get to a point people squeeze, and they'll swing back the other way again. You know, but right now it's swinging the wrong way for us.
So in these districts, like your Westfield, your Avon, your Blaine, like, what? Because you have to vote whether you're okay with the referendum. What kind of percentages are they squeaking by or
Yeah,
they're squeaking by?
yeah. Now even mine may not be, I can tell you Westfield's squeaking by right now. I used to work at HSE and I can tell you, they're looking to go out in 26 to rerun the referendum. And so a lot of those districts are having to gear up pretty quickly for 26, because now you can only run them in general elections now too. So you gotta hit the even years. You either gotta run in 26 or you gotta run in 28. And some of them won't be able to make it to 28.
And are they, I mean, typically, are they passing? I mean, is the voter passing the referendums?
Yes,
Kind of a flip or
Yeah.
what?
Depends on the district.
yeah, it depends on the district.
it doesn't seem like rural ones pass them as easy as
That's right.
the
Yeah.
city schools.
I would agree with that.
Plainfield has never needed a referendum, but that's because of the whole Ronald Reagan, Ameriplex Parkway, we're getting money from all of those places. I don't know how that will be impacting.
So they didn't tip any of that?
No, well, they tipped it against Decatur Township. It sits in the middle of Plainfield and Decatur Township, so Decatur Township didn't receive any money.
For the
Hence-
commercial.
Yes, for all the commercial, Plainfield got it all, hence Decatur's on its third referendum and, was possibly gonna close down buildings, so they were
Yeah,
wanting it to sunset, but,
yeah.
we'll see.
So it is, I mean, each district kind of has its own story going on right now and where they fit in there, what they've got to do. So,
So what percentage of school districts are in like, the same financial situation we're in or better?
I would say your cash position, you're probably in the top 10% right now. And on a cash position,
Right.
okay? Not many people have a 43% cash balance in their education fund. So
But in a couple of years, you can really make a big dent in that.
you could, and that's why I always talk about the revenue, not the budget. And that's where we need to spend to, is the revenue. Again, though, where you're fortunate is you also have these bonds rolling off and creating capacity that would otherwise put a lot of pressure on your operations fund. Here's another place schools are really squirmy, and you're not close to it. But if this rate right here, the debt rate gets over 70 cents, automatic referendum for anything they want for debt from there on out. For debt. And those are really hard to get done.
Yes, when we were.
So
I was looking
even,
at-
you can see, even with my forecast of that decline in AV, your rate's at 49 cents and 28. But there'll continue to be pressure on that rate as that AV.
So you're saying spend the revenue, so that's for everything, that's issuing debt, that's raises, that's everything.
Yeah.
Spend the revenue.
When I'm talking to your administration, I always like saying, no matter what the budget is, this is what I'm seeing your revenue to be, and that's really what we should be spending to, is the revenue.
So this referendum that we got approved, do we need to spend, I mean,
The debt.
up to that debt that we issued, can we, do we want to spend all of that or?
Oh, yeah, when you issue it, you really should spend it within 2 years. You should spend it all in 2 years. But by the end of 2
We
years.
weren't exactly sure if we're gonna have the
Yeah.
money to come back to it.
Yeah, so once we issue the bonds, you'll get those proceeds, and you really do want to spend it all down in 2 years, but in 2 years, then we're gonna have more capacity open back up.
So was there any talk of getting rid of the geo bonds yet, or that kind of?
So
quiet?
where they focus on were short-term GOs, and I was guilty of this, I did this when I worked at the school. I mean, I'd issue 1-year GOs and issue a lot of money to do short-term projects that would otherwise ended up in my operations fund. And they don't like the idea, because you're really getting around the operations fund by doing 1-year GOs. So they said it's a cooling off period if you do a GO and you pay it back less than 2 years, you have to wait a year. But there's a way around that too. You just simply, since that won't be our issue at all, because when we issue this bond, we're going to be issuing it for more than 1 year. We're going
Right.
to be issuing, we're going to be paying more. Well, actually, you can see what we come up with, I modeled in, like, I think it's $1.3 million next year, then $2.5 million, and then step down. That will create over $1 million capacity in to issue more bonds if you want. Obviously, being flexible, with these things is kind of key to the game right now. It's the districts that don't have the flexibility, they're gonna, that's rubber's gonna hit the road, meet the road. So, but anyway, don't get overly confident. We're in a good cash position, but we are going to have to react. We're not getting huge money out of that formula like we should be getting. I guess 4%.
Safer.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
We got nothing but an adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
We're adjourned.
Good luck, Jay.
All right, before you walk out the door, can we just, since I can't have